Good morning. I asked the video sound crew if I could stand down here rather than being further away, and they said it was okay, so here I am. So again, I'll invite you to find a nice open posture, feet flat on the ground, closing your eyes if you choose, or just allowing your gaze to fall gently downward. Finding your breath in your body. Just resting your attention in this moment. Noticing where your attention gets pulled to. Perhaps it's to something that happened earlier, or something you imagine will happen later. And I'll invite you to try on this simple thought, to experiment with this idea. Just notice what you notice as you try this on. And the idea is this, that who you are, right here, right now, as you are, in this moment, is enough. That you could do more things, you could collect more gold stars, impress more people, put more zeros in front of the decimal point in your bank account, get more likes on Instagram. You could do all of this, and none of this will make you more enough. That you are just as worthy of your own love and kindness as anyone else. No more, no less. And that you have just as much access to unconditional love as anyone else. Thank you. So where to start? My father was a minister. I grew up in a church. And I wanted nothing to do with organized religion for 25 years. Nothing. All I could see was hypocrisy. That's all I could see. And growing up, I was socially insecure. I was filled with doubt. I felt that there was something about me that was wrong, that was flawed, that wasn't enough, that wasn't worthy. And so I set about this plan to convince others and myself that that was not true, to fill the hole, to convince people that I was enough, that I was okay, that I was worthy. And the way that I did that was by trying to be perfect, by trying to appear that I had no needs, by trying to appear that I could master everything. And if anyone has tried this, you know it's exhausting, right? It's very difficult to try and manipulate the whole world to see you a certain way. And so by my mid-20s, my anxiety, my insecurity was overwhelming. And by that point, I was self-medicating, I was manipulating, I was deceiving, I was doing everything I could to try and overcome this, to suppress it, to avoid it, to push it away, to escape it. And I was standing talking to a friend of mine who was a counselor. There was a little white picket fence between us, and she said, maybe there is no escape. Maybe you need to be with it. And at that moment, this is no exaggeration, at that moment, I wanted to leap over the fence and do physical harm to her. Because I had spent my entire life trying to avoid these feelings, and here was someone who's saying that maybe the answer isn't avoidance, maybe the answer is to be with them. So I started a mindfulness practice. I don't know why I started a mindfulness practice, because it was mostly uncomfortable. You know, if you look on the cover of any magazine that is selling mindfulness, right, you generally see thin, blonde, blissful women. You don't see men, you don't see people of color, you don't see people with real bodies, right? And so what you see is this idea that if you sit quietly, suddenly you will be blissful. And I don't know how many people in this room have any kind of practice where they sit quietly, But if you do, you know that what you actually experience is your experience. You actually have all of it. You have the sadness and the frustration and the fear and the anxiety and the joy and the restlessness and the boredom and the love and all of it. That's what mindfulness is. It's sitting with things as they are. It's not an escape. It's not a way to avoid. It's not a way to be distant from the human experience. It's the opposite. So I had the good fortune of going to hear the Dalai Lama speak. And now remember, I had been meditating at this point for about 18 months, and I thought this was my opportunity for escape, actually. At the time, I thought this was my way. If I sat long and hard enough, that I just took my perfectionism, right, and added it to my practice. And I thought if I sat long and hard enough, at some point I would no longer feel anger and fear and sadness and restlessness in this hole and all of these things. And I sat listening to the Dalai Lama, and he said, really, the point of all this is to access kindness. It's to access compassion. That's why we sit quietly. We sit with things as they are so that we can access the heart of compassion. Now, remember, I was so deep in my perfectionism that this was the actual thought in my head at that time when the Dalai Lama said that. I said, well, what does the Dalai Lama know, really? I've been at this for 18 months. I think I have a little better handle on this than the Dalai Lama. And then, not long after that, I was enrolled in a mindfulness-based stress reduction program as a clinical intern. And I was sitting next to a woman, Maggie. So at this point, I'm 27 years old, and Maggie is in her mid-40s. And Maggie shares with me that she is 3 months into a terminal diagnosis of breast cancer. And at this point, just a week before she's sitting with me, she told me that the doctors said, it's metastasizing too rapidly, it's not responding to the chemotherapy, we're going to discontinue treatment, and we're going to treat you for pain. So she knew where this was headed. And I was overwhelmed. I had never been in a situation like this before. And so I did what we do. I tried to make her feel better. I babbled on. I told her it was going to be okay, all these things that we do. And she said, Dave, hold on. She said, I just want you to know that I think this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I had no frame of reference for that whatsoever. And this is what she said. She said, I wake up in the morning and I'm afraid, and I'm angry, and I feel like it's unfair. And she said, but I spent the first 40 years of my life trying to do everything I could to prove that I was worthy of love, to get people to treat me a certain way so it would trigger my body to produce love. That's what I did. And she said, when I got this diagnosis, what I realized is that's not how you get love. That's not how you access love. The way you get love is by being loving. And she said, so for the last 3 months, she said, I think I've had more love in my life than I did in the previous 40 years. I don't want this to happen. I don't want to leave my family. But if this is what I have been given, I am going to do this with as much love as I possibly can. So that really rattled me to my core. I had no frame of reference for that. I had never heard anything like that. Now, I'm not saying that had never been said to me before. I'm just saying I had never heard it. And so I spent the next almost 30 years trying to understand how that's possible. And I found example after example after example in human experience. Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps. Right? Example after example of people who have taken the most difficult experiences and done it well. One of my clients right now that I'm coaching, a very, very creative person who has aphasia. He's losing language. And so he can't recall words, very, very simple words that he always used to be able to recall. And when he came to me, he said, I think this is outside my control. Doctors don't know what's causing it, and so I want to do it well. If this is what I'm handed, I want to do it well. And there's a great moment. I have to tell you this story because this is one of my favorite. So he was trapped he has been delayed in an airport in Philadelphia, and he had been there for a very long time. And things weren't going well, and they weren't getting on their plane. And so now they're on about 36 hours. And so he went up to the woman behind the desk, and he said, I was about to say something incredibly unkind. I was prepared. I was ready. He said, and I looked right at her, and I said, you are a slumber. Because he couldn't recall the word that he wanted to say. And so I thought, what a great opportunity, right? What a great advantage aphasia was in that moment. He just couldn't come up with the nasty word, and he came up with this random word. So I want to share with you what I've learned in a nutshell in the last 30 years. The biggest thing that's become very clear to me is that if we think about life, we can think about it in two big factors that affect our well-being. And one is what shows up. There's all the stuff that shows up in life. There's events, there's weather, there's people, there's all the traffic, all of those things. The birth of a child, all of those things. And then there's what shows up internally. There's fear and sadness and restlessness and pain and all of these, and thoughts and sensations, all of these things that show up. And all of that, all of what shows up has an impact on our well-being. It's conditional. It's outside our control. You cannot choose in any given moment what emotional experience shows up. It just, boom, there it is. Stuck in traffic, right? Boom, there it is. You know, someone raises an eyebrow when you're telling them something important to you, boom, something shows up. Right? It's just how it is. And then there's what we practice. This is the other big piece, what we practice. What skills are we working on? What internal resources are we cultivating? Right? How are we responding to what shows up in life? And so what we know from the research is very clear, that the more we focus on what shows up in life to determine the quality of our lives, even if it's good stuff, the more we struggle. One of my favorite examples of this is Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer, who trains very, very hard, wins more gold medals than anyone has ever won in this event, I think actually in any event. And after each Olympics, he lapses into a deep depression because he believes that this is going to prove something about himself to himself and the world. Right? So the more we depend on what shows up to determine the quality of our lives, the more we struggle. It turns out that the more we focus on what we practice, where we put our attention and energy, the more we thrive. Even in very, very difficult circumstances, we can thrive with our practice. So that's something really important that I've learned. And I want to talk a little bit about practice. We're always practicing something. Always. Right now, as you sit here, you are practicing something. The way it works is that our brain is cataloging our behavior. It's constantly cataloging our behavior, and if we do anything enough, our brain assumes that it must be important for our survival. And so while we sleep at night, it rewires itself to accommodate whatever we did during the day. That's how it works. There is no neutral. You're always practicing something. And sometimes what we practice is really aligned with our values, and sometimes what we practice, we're just doing it because it's familiar and comfortable. We know it. We've done it in the past. So how many people in this room have ever yelled at a small child about the importance of kindness? Has anyone ever? Right? That's exactly what I'm talking about. We see an unkind act. We value kindness. We see it as important, and we see it as being threatened. So we feel something in our body. What shows up? Maybe anger, maybe fear, discomfort of some kind. And instead of acting from kindness, the value, we act to try and purge this emotional experience. Right? That I used to see as hypocrisy. I now see that as humanity. That's just who we are. That's just real. That's evolutionary biology. That's baked into us. And so we can work with that. We don't have to judge ourselves for that. We can accept that that's part of being human, and we can keep reorienting our practice day in and day out. And Annie Dillard, the American poet, she has this great thing. She says, how we live our days is how we live our life. That's practice, right? What are we doing today? And Bruce Lee, my favorite philosopher, says that under duress, we do not rise to our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. So whatever we do day in and day out, when life gets hard, that's where we'll go. We won't suddenly find another gear. We'll go back to what we've always done. Yeah, under duress, we do not rise to our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. So there you are in Santa Barbara trying to go south at 3 p.m. on a Friday, right? And traffic shows up. right? And you may find yourself having a biological reaction to that. You grip the steering wheel a little more tightly. You maybe come up with unique phrases about the other drivers, and all kinds of things go on. And what I want to suggest to you is that's a practice. That's a practice. You're going to get better at that. That's where you're going to go sooner next time. You know, someday if you do this enough, you'll be a professional traffic resenter. You can go on the road. And so what I want to suggest to you that it's also available to you to relax your hands on the steering wheel, take a deep breath into your belly, and be grateful for the fact that you have a vehicle. Yeah. And wish that the other drivers may get where they need to go safely. This is available to you as a practice, and you'll get better at that if you do that repeatedly. And I'll just say as an aside about traffic, I love this idea of traffic because we treat it as if we are a victim to the traffic, as if we are stuck in traffic. We rarely entertain the reality that we are the traffic. Right? There we are. We're driving down the road, and we're like, oh, these people. And right next to us is someone looking at you, saying, oh, these people, right? We're a participant. How we participate, that's up to us. So, given this, given that we're always practicing something, given that what shows up is outside our control, and that what we practice is really the only choice we have, what does that mean about a good life? What does that mean about a good life? Well, here's what I would suggest. I would suggest that on a regular basis, and I mean daily, I mean hourly, on a regular basis, we can stop, we can feel our feet on the ground, we can feel our breath in our body, and we can find some space and some acceptance for things exactly as they are. Exactly as they are. So when I started sitting with my anxiety and I got to a point where I accepted that maybe this is just what my nervous system does. Maybe this is just how it's going to be. That was the last panic attack I ever had. In that moment of, okay, when I think about the future, when I think about standing in front of a group of people, when I think about any of these things, my body does this. I'll work with that, rather than try. So we can spend time cultivating acceptance. We can spend time cultivating gratitude. Right? We can practice those things that we seek. We don't have to wait until conditions are just right? Until people treat us the way we want to be treated, until everything is just right, and then hope that that will trigger the emotional response that we're seeking. We can cultivate that day in and day out. It's the ultimate shortcut. Right? You can just be loving, and then boom, you have love. You can be kind, and then you have kindness. You can be accepting, and then you have acceptance. So this idea that whatever it is you believe that the perfect circumstances will bring for you, practice that now. And practice it daily. When I work with my clients, I ask them to do this for 10 minutes in the morning, and then 1 minute 10 times over the course of the day. Don't wait until Sunday. All day, every day. And you will be shocked at how much love and kindness and acceptance and gratitude you will have in your life. And this is not a replacement. This is not suppressing these other challenging experiences. Right? This is making a vessel, a vehicle, a place for all of that to exist. And this is the other key thing about practice. Knowledge is not practice. Right? Talking about being kind does not give you the benefits of being kind. Just in the same way that knowing that exercise is good for you does not give you the benefits of exercise. Right? Exercising gives you the benefits of exercise. And I grew up in a family where we were what I would call talktivists. We would sit around a table and we would identify who was to blame and who was wrong, and was it the Republicans or the Democrats, or was it the liberals or the conservatives, was it the rich or the poor? We'd identify who was to blame, and then we'd get up from the table as if we had done something. We hadn't done something. We hadn't supported anyone. Right? We hadn't addressed in any real way oppression or poverty or injustice. We had just talked about it. And so what I strongly urge you to think about is what are the ways that I'm actually cultivating these things? I'm actually cultivating acceptance. I'm stopping and cultivating gratitude and love and kindness. And I'm engaging in kind, effective action. Because if that's not the grace of God, I don't know what is. Our capacity, life is a miracle. There's no explanation for this that you can give me. There's none. And if you are a Big Bang person, or if you're a guy in robes in the sky person, or if you're whatever it is there any explanation you can give me for this that is not beyond comprehensible? And life is hard, right? Life's a miracle, and life's hard. And neither one of those cancels out the other. The fact that life is miraculous does not make it less hard. And the fact that life is hard does not change the fact that it's a miracle. So how do we work gracefully with both of those things, day in and day out? And I think the fact that we can stop and pay attention and accept things as they are and cultivate love, even in the presence of really unwanted stuff. People think I'm crazy for saying this, but I really believe it's true. I think going through chemotherapy for cancer was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life. And I went through twice, really incredibly powerful. And for three big reasons. One is because I had a lot of time to myself to ask what really matters. What really, really matters. And what became very clear is the thing that matters most to me is my responsibility as a father. That is something that's deeply, deeply important to me, and that became crystal clear. So that's one thing. The other thing is to sit with discomfort, to sit with inescapable discomfort. There was something so powerful about there was no escape, there was no way out, there it was. And then the third thing, I was sitting in my second round of chemotherapy, and I was getting a round of immunotherapy, and my body had a reaction to it, and it's called Rieger shakes, I think. And so my whole body was shaking violently, as if I was having a seizure. But I wasn't. I was fully aware, fully awake. It was as if I was shivering violently, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. And tears were running down my face, and I was having one of those, crud, I have cancer moments. And this infusion nurse came over, and she put her hand right here on my shoulder. And all she said to me was, "I'll be here." 20 minutes. She just sat there with her hand on my shoulder, tears running down my face. She wasn't encouraging me. She wasn't telling me to be strong, that I'll get through it. She just was with me. It's one of the most kind, compassionate things I've ever experienced in my life. And then after 20 minutes, she lifted her hand and walked away. After my body stopped shaking. We're all capable of this. But we're also capable of being petty, right? And getting really stuck on the fact that things aren't the way we want them to be. And that's human too. And so for me, it's about beginning again over and over and over. I realize that I'm going down the route of wanting things to be just the way I want them. And then I connect with what's most important, and then I take action from that place, over and over and over. And the more that we do this, the less and less our life hinges on the conditions, on what shows up, and the more and more stability we have from what we practice. So the last story I'll tell you. My wife, who is far wiser than I will ever be, everyone should marry way in over their head. Is anyone here who feels like they married in over their head? Yes, good for you. That's the way to do it. Marry way over your head. And she had this practice, this phrase that she would use, and she would say, "It's all love." And she would say it's all love when things were going really well and when things were going really poorly. And sometimes she'd use it as a joke and sarcastically, and sometimes she'd use it in this way that just shot right to the center of my heart. And so I have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old son, two sons, 19 and 21. When my 19-year-old was 16, he had this great, very effective strategy of dismissing me by using my first name. So I would be talking about something that was important to me, and he would say, "Whatever, Dave." It was great. It was so effective. It was so good. And my wife would look at me and she would say, "It's all love." And then my oldest son was in college, and he was playing soccer there, and he tore his ACL, he tore a ligament in his knee, and had to sit out for a season. And we were all just gutted for him. It's a really important part of his identity, being an athlete. And we were crying together, and my wife looked at me and said, "It's all love. Even now, unconditional love is available." So I would practice this, and I would practice stopping several times a day, feeling my feet on the ground, feeling my breath in my body, and waiting until I could feel the sense that no matter what was going on, unconditional love was available. I just wait until I could feel that. So I'd do that practice over and over. And then one day I was driving through Montecito, and I was on my way to Cottage Healthcare, and I was going to pitch them a training that I do. And so it was potentially a lucrative contract. It felt important. And this pedestrian stepped off the road, or off the curb, and in California we're not allowed to hit them, so I put on the brakes. So I put on the brakes, and my coffee went everywhere. Windshield, dashboard, khakis, shirt, everywhere. And I could feel my whole body just constrict and tighten. And then, clear as a bell, I could hear, "It's all love. It's all love," even with coffee on my khakis and on my shirt. And so I pulled over, and I got paper towels and wiped everything down, and went to the healthcare company and explained what had happened and why I was covered in coffee. And what I want to suggest to you is, if you practice these things that you talk about here at Unity, if you practice them, if you integrate them into your lives in a really deep and consistent way, then when life takes an unexpected turn, goes in a direction that you had never predicted or wanted, you'll go back to that. You'll go back to that. Thank you so much.